Hello everyone, welcome to Viti Pathshala. Good morning to all of you. In this class, we would be going to start the modern history. So इस क्लास में हम जो है मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री स्टार्ट करने जा रहे हैं. So modern history part is there in the 11th class as well as in the 12th class. It considers about the modern history. Now if you have not attended the previous classes, so it is no problem. अगर आपने पुरानी क्लासेस नहीं ली हैं तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. अब जो है रेगुलरली इन क्लासेस को ले लेना, बिकॉज वी आर स्टार्टिंग द हिस्ट्री वंस अगेन. सो दोबारा जो है मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री स्टार्ट हो रही है 11th क्लास में. सो हेयर द लेवल वुड बी हाई, सो वी वुड बी गोइंग स्लो एंड धीरे धीरे सब चीज़ों को हम कंप्लीट करेंगे. एंड इफ यू हैव एनी डाउट यू कैन आस्क मी देयर. Now what would be our learning objective? First thing is that what we would be learning. Now to acquaint yourself with the European interaction with the Indian states and the society from 1600 to the 1750. Commercial networks and the institutions in the India in the early modern India period. The Indian ports and their importance in the Indian Ocean trade. The impact of the entry of the European trading companies on Indian merchants' trade and the commerce. The Portuguese trade interest in India. The impact of the Portuguese and the Dutch presence in India. The rivalry and the wars between the French and the Dutch. The colonial settlement of the Denmark and their prominence. The clashes over the trading monopoly between the French and the British in the Carnatic region. The emergence of the England as an undisputed power after the 3 Carnatic Wars. So this should be our syllabus for this chapter, and these topics we would be covering. So lengthy topic, so we will be going slow. Let's start. So introduction. The beginning of the British rule in India conventionally ascribed to the 1757. Now if we talk about the conventionally, the British rule in India, it started in 1757. Now this is a landmark year, so that you remember this year. So this is an important date, you must remember this date, that is the 1757. After the Battle of the Plassey was won by the English East India Company against the Nawab. So in the Battle of the Plassey, who won? The English won the Battle of the Plassey against the Nawab of Bengal, and they came into the power. But the European had arrived in India by the beginning of the 16th century. So they became the powerful in 1757, but they have arrived in India earlier in the 16th century, and they were trading, and they know the people of the India from long back. Their original intention was to procure the pepper, cinnamon, cloves and other spices from the European market, for the European market, and participate in the trade of the Indian Ocean. So original intention. So what was their original intention? Why they came to the India? They came as a trader. वो भारत में ट्रेडर के रूप में आए, और यहाँ से वो पेपर, सिनेमन, क्लोव्स और स्पाइसेस लेके जाने वाले थे यूरोप में, and to participate in the trade of the Indian Ocean. Now what do you mean by the participation? Participate का मतलब है कि यहाँ पर पहले से ही दूसरे लोग भी थे जो कि ट्रेड में इन्वॉल्व थे. Now दूसरे लोग कौन थे? पहले अरब्स थे जो कि ट्रेड करते थे, अरब्स की मोनोपोली थी. Now earlier there were other peoples who were involved in the trade. There was the Arab monopoly over the India. The Portuguese were the first European to establish themselves in India. और सबसे पहले भारत आने वाले कौन होंगे? पुर्तगाली या फिर पोर्चुगीज, वो भारत आएंगे और अपने आप को यहां पर एस्टेब्लिश करेंगे. दे विल एस्टेब्लिश देमसेल्फ हियर इन द इंडिया. वास्को द गामा discovered the direct sea route to India from Europe around the Cape of the Good Hope, Africa at the end of the 15th century. 15वीं शताब्दी के खत्म होते होते वास्को डिगामा, जो कि एक सेलर था ऑफ पुर्तगाल का, वो भारत की तरफ रास्ता ढूंढ लेगा. Now the Vasco da Gama was a sailor from the Europe, and he found a way from the Europe to the India. Now he find the way Europe to the India through the Cape of the Good Hope of Africa. Now it is not that he was the first person to do so. There were other persons also. So और भी persons थे. ठीक है. What do you mean by 15th century? यहाँ पर 15th century का मतलब क्या हुआ? इन्होंने end of 15th century बोला है. End. So it means that the 1490s और 1500 के बीच का समय. So it was the last 10 years. That is the 1490 to 1500. हमेशा ईयर को हम पीछे लेते हैं. 15th century, 16th century, अभी 21st century है. ठीक है. So this way we will be, century is taken like this. Now subsequently the Portuguese conquered the Goa on the west coast in the 1510. Goa then became the political headquarter for the Portuguese in India, and further east in the Malacca and the Java. The Portuguese perfected a pattern of controlling the Indian Ocean trade through a combination of political aggressiveness and naval supremacy. Now, why the Portuguese perfected in controlling the Indian trade? There were the two reasons. There were the combination of political aggressiveness, and the second, they were the naval superior. Their forts at the Daman and the Diu enabled them to control the shipping in the seas in the Arabian Sea using their well-armed ships. The other European nations who came to the India nearly a century later, especially the Dutch and the English, modeled their activities on the Portuguese blueprint. Thus, we need to understand the advent of the European trading companies as an ongoing process of engagement with the political authorities, local merchant, and society, which culminated in the conquest of the Bengal by the British in 1757. Now, this lesson has two parts. The political history of the India and the changing scenario that emerged after the 1600 is discussed in the first part. So पहले पार्ट में इन्होंने जो है political history of India उसको डिस्कस किया है, and how the Vasco da Gama and the other came to India and the other Portuguese settled in India. That we have discussed in the first part. The second part deals with the arrival of European trading companies in India and the impact of each one made in the Indian society. Now let's start with the first part, that is from the first part. The first topic is political affairs. Now in the first part we will begin with the 1600 to the 1650. This we will start with the Mughal Empire. Now, in order to study the advent of the Europeans, we must know the Mughal Empire. We must study the Mughal Empire. The time period is 1600 to 1650. So Akbar, we will begin with the Akbar. So Akbar died in the 1605 में Akbar die करता है. So these years of the death and the birth, death and the birth, you should remember. Especially the death you must remember of the rulers. This was the period when the Mughal Empire was at the peak of its power. The Europeans were quite aware of the wealth and the power of Mughals. The English poet even wrote about the fabulous wealth of India. Travelers from all parts of the Europe visited India regularly during the 16th and the 17th centuries. The journals of their travels present a detailed contemporary account of the empire and society in India. By 1600, Akbar had achieved his imperial dream and extended the frontiers of the Mughal Empire. Akbar has achieved the imperial dream and extended the frontiers of the Mughal Empire through his conquest in the Rajasthan and the Gujarat. Gujarat was conquered in the 1573 and this gave the Mughal Empire valuable access to the port of the Surat, now which was a gateway to the west of the Asia. So the one of the major reason Akbar wanted to acquire the Gujarat was to become a conqueror and was to get the important port of the Surat. Beside trade, the ships carrying the pilgrims to the Makkah left from the Surat. The importance of the Surat to the Mughals can be apprehended from the fact that Surat has two governors. Now, one the governor of the city and other was the governor of the castle when had been built on the river Tapti to protect the city. So दो गवर्नर होते थे उस समय पर, एक गवर्नर होता था सिटी का, दूसरा कास्टल का. The governor of the city was the in charge of the civilian affairs and collecting the revenues from the custom duties. So this was the first person who who was in the charge of the civilian affair and collecting the revenues and the civil duties or the custom duties. Now Akbar had also tried to extend his empire in east beyond the Bihar by conquering the Bengal. But Bengal was not really integrated into the empire until nearly 3 decades later when it became one of the provinces, सूबा अंडर द जहांगीर. जब तक वो सूबा नहीं बन गया जहांगीर के अंडर में. Now, under the Akbar, the revenue system of the empire had been revamped by the Todar Mal so that the unified system of the governance and the revenue collection could function throughout the empire. At his death, therefore, Akbar left a powerful, economical, prosperous, and well administered empire. Now, this point is very important. Now, when Akbar died in this 1605, the Mughal Empire was at its peak. Because so once it was at its peak when there was the Babur, and again in the time of the Akbar, the graph will go high, and more than it will go high more than what the Babur's graph gone. It was powerful, economically prosperous, and a well-administered empire. Now, such type of the lines you would be required to write in your mains answer. The Dutch, followed by the English, arrived in the Surat in the early years of the 1600 to begin their trading activities. The Mughal governor permitted them to trade and to set up their factories as the business. What were the factories? Factories were the business premises of the European traders, which also functioned as the warehouse were termed. But they were not allowed to have any territorial authority over any part of the city. So at the early time they were allowed to set up their factory. What was the factory? एक कारखाना होता था. So factory was like a warehouse. There can the Europeans can live and they can work. So at the first they were allowed to have any territory. They were not allowed to have any territory. They were only allowed to have the trade. Now this frustrated their ambition to follow the Portuguese model. Now this was regarding the Dutch. The English acquired the island of the Bombay in 1668 and set up their headquarters in the Bombay in 1687. Their primary objective was to develop the Bombay as an alternative base for their operations. But the Surat, under the protection of the Mughal state, still remained the preferred center of the commercial activity for the merchants. Now 1600 to the 1650, during this period, what was the scenario in the South India? तो इसी समय में अभी हमने पढ़ा कि ऊपर कौन था? मुगल थे. मुगल, that was the Akbar and the Jahangir. Now who would be here? So in 1600 to the 1650, South India. The South India, especially the Tamil region, presented a sharp contrast to the centralized stability of the Mughal Empire. In these decades, politically the region was fragmented and unsettled. Under Vijayanagar rule, 3 Nayak kingdoms have been set up in Tamil Nadu region. Now in the Madurai, Tanjavur, the Senji, the objective was to provide the financial and the manpower resources to empire. After the defeat of the Vijayanagar in the 1565 in the Battle of the Talikota by the combined forces of the Ahmednagar, Bijapur and the Golconda, the central authority of the once dominant kingdom became very weak. The Nayak kingdoms became virtually autonomous, though they made the ritualistic acknowledgement to the authority of the Vijayanagar Empire. In addition to the larger Nayak kingdoms, several local chiefs also controlled some parts of the region. The most notable of them was probably the Setupati of the Ramanathapuram, who was also keen to assert his independence. Between 1590 to 1649, the region witnessed several military conflicts arising out of these unsettled political condition. Madurai and the Tanjavur fought several times to establish their superiority. So Madurai और तंजावुर ये भी लड़ेंगे आपस में अपनी superiority को establish करने के लिए. The Vijayanagar Empire, it is also becoming weak and it is starting to faction into the various independent kingdoms. Now there were also rebellions against the Vijayanagar Empire. Beside these ongoing conflicts, Golconda invaded the Coromandel in the 1646 and annexed the area between the Pulicat and the Senthom, which also changed the political scenario in this region. The Dutch and the English were able to acquire territorial rights on the east coast during these years. They realized that they needed a base on the Coromandel coast to access the peace goods needed for trading with the spice producing islands of the Indonesia. The Dutch has successfully negotiated to acquire the Pulicat from the Nayak of the Senji and constructed a fort there. The English got a piece of the land further south from the local chiefs Dharmara Venkatadari Nayak, now which they built the Fort St. George in the 1639. Now all these things we do not require. These things are extra things. These things will never come in your exam. So I don't know why so much of the information they have included in the new books. Now, thus an English settlement came up which eventually grew into the Chennai, that is the Madras, the capital of the Madras Presidency. Now, next comes is the 1650 to the 700 time, the Mughal Empire again. The Emperor Aurangzeb began an ambitious program of extending his empire south to the Deccan, and the kingdoms of the Ahmednagar, Bijapur, and Golconda were conquered in the 1680s. This extended the Mughal control of the Deccan as far south as the Chennai. नाउ अगर इस समय की मैं आपसे बात करूं तो इस समय में जो है मुगल एम्पायर में जो सबसे स्ट्रांग होगा वो औरंगजेब होगा, और औरंगजेब अब जो है साउथ में डेक्कन पर कब्जा करना चाहता था. नाउ ही वांटेड टू एक्वायर द कंट्रोल. He wanted to acquire the Deccan part. Now, this extended the Mughal control of the Deccan as far south as the Chennai. But the overextended Mughal empire soon began to reveal its inherent weakness. Now, this became the most apparent when the Marathas under the Shivaji began to grow in the power and the military strength. They attacked the Surat with the impunity in the 1664, though it was soon abandoned, but their second raid in the 1670 devastated the Surat and its trade took several years to recover. The seriously challenged the claim of the Mughal invincibility, and it sounded the beginning of the gradual disintegration of the Mughal Empire. Now, after the attack on the Surat, Shivaji turned his attention on the South India and defeated the Nayaks of the Senji and the Thanjavur. Though the Senji was conquered by the Mughals a few years later, Thanjavur survived as a Maratha-ruled state. The Maratha kings, with their inclusive policy of assimilating Tamil intellectual cultural tradition, made the Thanjavur the capital of the Tamil region. The next they are asking about the topic, that is the 1700 to the 1750, the Mughal Empire and the successor states. In the history they have not written a good book. The old book is far better than this book. Now, the Aurangzeb, the last of the great Mughals, died in the 1707. Aurangzeb 1707 में मर जाएगा, and after the death of the Aurangzeb, the period that will begin is the modern history. Aurangzeb की death के बाद modern history will start. Now, one of the major development following his death was the establishment of the what have been called as the successor states. The Mughal viceroys in the various parts of the country, Awadh, the Bengal, the Hyderabad, Carnatic, set themselves up as the independent rulers. The English and the Dutch has understood the vulnerability of the Mughal state. In Bengal and the Carnatic, the Nawab has borrowed heavily from the English. बंगाल और कार्नेटिक में जो है नवाब्स ने जो है इंग्लिश से बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा लिया हुआ था. दे हैव बोरोड हेवीली एंड असाइंड वास्ट ट्रैक्ट्स ऑफ द लैंड to them so that the English could collect the land revenue as the repayment for the loans. तो उस लोन को वापस देने के लिए उसने कह दिया कि तुम्हें जितना पैसा चाहिए तुम इनसे ले लो. यू कैन कलेक्ट द मनी फ्रॉम द पीपल और द peasants of that time. Now, this marks the beginning of the British rule as the revenue collectors. The British before becoming the territorial power, they became the revenue collector. The name Carnatic originally referred to the region occupied by the Kannada speaking people. In the 18th century, it included the region lying between the Eastern Ghat and the Western Ghat. In modern Indian states of the Tamil Nadu, this is extra information. You cannot learn 400 pages of the book for the mains exam. You cannot retain these whole things. Now, Karnataka, South Andhra Pradesh, and the Nawab of the Arcot controlled this region. By this time, the Dutch had given up the Pulikat and moved their headquarters further south to the Nagapatnam. Now, we have to read this like a storybook. We don't have to learn all these things, because it is not relevant from the exam point of neither for the mains nor for the your prelims. So we have to go like a storybook. We have to fast in these chapters, and what the thing we have to consolidate for the exam is present in your old book. So the scenario is that when you will watch the videos of the Mrinal also, he is also suggesting you to study these books like a storybook, not to grasp the things. Now they had decided to shift their focus to the spice producing islands of the Indonesia and establish their capital at the Jakarta, Batavia. Now the one thing that is missing in the chapter is the connectivity. That they were discussing about the Akbar, then they jumped to the Aurangzeb. In between, they were discussing about the Vijayanagar, and the connectivity is not there. So connectivity is the issue. Earlier, when I was taking the history classes, I began with these books, but I find that these books are not connecting the things. Now a student can get confused. Now Chennai in the meanwhile had grown into a prosperous town. The English, after many years of the struggle, became a power to reckon with the region. Surat continued to suffer due to the uncertain political condition, and by the 1750, the local merchants had begun to declare themselves to be under the protection of the Dutch or the English in order to feel more secure. Bombay therefore became a viable alternative as the trade center, attracting the merchants from the Surat and the other parts of the Gujarat. Now, if I talk to you about the crux of the first part, so they are emphasizing on the Surat as a major port and why Akbar captured, and why later on the others also wanted to take the Surat as their port. Now the economy, agriculture. India was primarily an agricultural economy. Most of the population lived in the rural areas and they depended on the agriculture for their livelihood. Now, in addition to the food grains, they grew several commercial crops. Now, these included the sugar cane, oil seeds, cotton, and the indigo. Because they wanted to give intro before actual advent of the Euros, tried to give in the terms of the Portugal economy. So I guess. Now these included the sugar cane, the oil seeds, cotton, and the indigo. Now there was a brisk trade in the food grains, ghee, sugar, and the other food products from the surplus areas to the deficit area within the India. Now food grains particularly were transported on the coastal boats, and the Tamil region, for instance, imported food grains from the Andhra region and the Bengal. On the west coast, food grain from the Gujarat were exported to the Malabar region in the return of the pepper, cinnamon, and the ginger. Now, food grains were also shipped to the Dutch establishments in the Sri Lanka and the Batavia. So, this was about the agriculture. Next comes the cotton manufacturers. India also had a strong manufacturing base and was particularly famous for the variety of the cotton fabrics produced at the various centers across the country. Now, weaving, the second most important economic activity in the country, supported by the subsidiary activities like the spinning and the dyeing. सो वीविंग क्या थी, सेकंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी थी. उसके बाद जो एक्टिविटी आती है वो स्पिनिंग एंड दी डाइंग है. मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, डेट इज दी हैंडीक्राफ्ट प्रोडक्शन वाज कैरिड ऑन दी बोथ अर्बन एंड दी रूरल एरियाज. Luxury craft like the metal work were urban based. Now weaving was mostly done in the rural areas में होती थी weaving. And India had a great advantage in that cotton was grown in our country. Now Indian craft communities also possessed the specialized knowledge about the dyeing cotton using the chemicals like the alum to produce a permanent color. The Coromandel region was famous for its painted, that is the kalamkari fabric, which had designs drawn on the cloth and then dyed. By the 16th century, these had become the staple products for the consumers in the Southeast Asia, especially the Indonesia island. The cotton fabrics were the most important exports from the all parts of the India to the rest of the world. Now this continued well in the 18th century also. Next comes is the marketing. Now production for an external market was widespread, so that there was a high degree of the commercialization of the production beyond the subsistence levels. Now this required the organization of the marketing by the agencies which were distinct from the producers. That is a class of the merchant. Now merchant thus linked the producers who were dispensed in the rural areas with the urban markets within the country and with the external market outside the country. The extensive trade network in the country operated in the several circuits में operate होता था. From village markets to the regional markets and the large urban commercial centers, culminating in the ports which were the gateways to the market outside the country. Next comes is the merchant groups. Just as the various kinds of the markets functioned at the different scales, the merchants were also a homogeneous group. Now there were the traders and the retailers who serviced the मार्केट इन स्मॉल सेंटर्स. तो कौन होते थे यहाँ पर, ट्रेडर्स होते थे और रिटेलर्स होते थे जो कि स्मॉल सेंटर्स को सर्व करते थे. नाउ इफ द मर्केंटाइल एक्टिविटी कैन बी डीम्ड टू बी द पिरामिड, दिस क्लास ऑफ द मर्चेंट्स वुड बी द बेस ऑफ द पिरामिड. सो अगर इन्होंने कहा कि अगर हम एक मर्केंटाइल का एक हम पिरामिड बनाएं तो द क्लास ऑफ द मर्चेंट वुड विल बी द एट द बेस. सो मर्केंटाइल, सो मर्चेंट सबसे नीचे आएंगे. नाउ एट इट्स टॉप्स वर द ग्रेट मर्चेंट्स हु वर द प्राइम मूवर्स इन द ओवरसीज ट्रेड with the great reserves of the capital, who control the producers in the hinterlands of the ports. Now they generally employed the service of a network of the brokers. So below were the merchants and the above were the great merchants, and in between there were the brokers and the sub brokers to acquire the goods from the interior regions or the hinterland of the port town. The agents could be said to be the middle tier of the merchant pyramid. The banking and the rise of the merchant capitalist. Commercial institutions were also well developed to promote the such extensive trade. Now because a variety of the coins were in the circulation, there were the money changer or the sheriffs. सो यहाँ पर कॉइन सर्कुलेशन में थे बहुत ज्यादा, तो कॉइन्स होंगे तो इनको एक्सचेंज कराने वाले भी होंगे, करेंसी एक्सचेंज कराने वाले. So money changers or the sheriffs were there to test the coins for their purity and decide their value in the current terms. Now they served as the local bankers. इन्हें local bankers भी कहा गया. Instead of the transferring money as the cash from one place to another, the merchant issued the bills of the exchange known as the hundis. So ये क्या इशू करते थे? हुंडीज को इशू किया जाता था, जिसको बिल ऑफ द एक्सचेंज कहा गया है. Now which would be cashed by the sheriff at the different destination at the specified rate of the discount. For example, if you wanted to go from the A place to the B place and you wanted to carry money, but in between it can be lost or it can be looted by the people. So what you can do, you can get a bill of the exchange from a sheriff at your A place and you can get it cashed at the destination that is the B you wanted to go. The well-developed infrastructure and the organization of the trade enabled the rich merchants to amass large fortunes. Such merchant princes or the capitalists were found in part of the India. सो इनके अलग अलग नाम थे मर्चेंट्स के, और ये पूरे इंडिया में मिलते थे. नाउ व्हाट वर देयर नेम एट द डिफरेंट नेम्स एट द डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री. सो दे वर कॉल्ड एज द बनियाज एंड द पारसी मर्चेंट्स एट ऑफ द सूरत, द नगर सेट्स ऑफ द अहमदाबाद, द जगत सेट्स ऑफ द बंगाल एंड द मर्चेंट कम्युनिटीज ऑफ द कोरोमंडल. The contemporary European observers noted that these merchants appropriated all the profit from the trade to themselves, while the earning and the condition of the weavers and the peasants were pitifully poor. This rendered them especially vulnerable to the natural calamities like the famines. In the Madras region, for instance, the famine occurred at least the 10 times between the 1678 to 1750. Sometimes there was widespread famine which lasted for the several years on end. Now this drove the rural poor to sell themselves into the slavery. Dutch records from the Coromandel regularly mentions the male and the female slaves among the cargo sent to the Batavia. Next comes is the overseas trade. The overseas trade from both the east and the west coast was incorporated into the Indian Ocean trade, which had stabilized into the well-set pattern by the 16th century. Shipping in the Indian Ocean was segmented and carried in over the several demarcated stages. Shipping coming from the China and the Far East sailed up to the Malacca, where their cargoes were unloaded, and in return the goods from the west were taken back. So shipping में क्या होता था? Now ships जो कि चाइना से आती थी and the Far East they sailed to the Malacca, और मलाका वेयर देयर कार्गोज वर अनलोडेड. मलाका में जो है इनके कार्गोज खाली कर दिए जाते थे, और यहां से जो गुड्स उनको वापस वेस्ट में लेके जाना था वो जाता था यहां से. नाउ फ्रॉम मलाका शिप सेल टू द वेस्ट कोस्ट ऑफ द इंडिया टू द कैलिकट एंड द केम्बे और द सूरत इन द गुजरात. नाउ सच इंटरमीडिएट पोर्ट्स वर नोन एज द एंट्रे पोर्ट्स. इनको जो इंटरमीडिएट पोर्ट्स थे इनको हम क्या बोलते हैं? एंट्रे पोर्ट्स बोलते हैं. Now goods from the Europe and the West Asias were exchanged in these ports for the goods from the East, as well as locally produced pepper, spices, the dyes, clothes and the food grains. In the 16th century, the Calicut gradually lost out the Gujarat ports, which were served by a much larger hinterland producing a wider range of the products. The ports of the Coromandel coast like the Masulipatam, Pulicat and the ports further south served as an intermediate ports for the ships from the Burma and the Malay Peninsula. Now this was about the merchants, the agriculture and the trade, etc. Now next comes is the advent of the Europeans. The arrival of the Europeans, beginning with the Portuguese, was the first major external shock to the well-established and the regulated system of the trade. The primary interest of the Europeans was securing the spice for the Europe directly. सो इनका प्राइमरी एम क्या था, टारगेट क्या था कि मसाले लेके जाने हैं भारत से यूरोप में. नाउ इन ओल्डन डेज द स्पाइसेस वर कैरिड थ्रू द पर्शियन गल्फ पोर्ट्स एंड देन ओवरलैंड टू द मेडिटेरियन सी. Now they soon learned that the simple bilateral exchange was not workable in the Asian markets. Now this was mainly because there was no demand in the local economies for the product of the goods on the other than the gold and the silver. Now they came to know that there was a huge trade deficit. Now if they do not have the trade, they will not have the money. So इनको ये रियलाइज हो गया कि बायलेटरल एक्सचेंज नहीं हो पा रहा है, डेट हमारे प्रोडक्ट यहाँ पर कोई खरीद नहीं रहा है और हमारे जो दबादब जो इनके जो प्रोडक्ट हैं वो वहां पर बिक रहे हैं. On the other hand, because of the universal demand in the Southeastern Asian market for the Indian textile, clothes from the India served as a substitute medium of the exchange. The demand for the painted fabrics of the Coromandel coast in the Indonesian island in particular made the Dutch and the English set up their establishment on the east coast to procure the cloth that could be the profitably exchanged for the spices. Now next comes is the collaboration with the Indian merchants. From the beginning of their trading ventures in the India, Europeans realized that they could succeed only with the help of the collaboration with the leading Indian merchants. तो शुरू से पता था अगर हमें बिजनेस करना है तो हमें इंडियंस के साथ हाथ मिलाना पड़ेगा. We have to come together with these Indian merchants. The merchants on their part saw the Europeans a great new business opportunity for expansion and worked with them. और वहीं पर मर्चेंट्स को ये लगा कि ये यूरोप में जो है मेरा माल भेजेंगे तो एक नई मार्केट मेरे को मिल जाएगी. In Surat, the merchants were functioning with the security of the Mughal government to support them in the case of the any problem. But in Pulicat and the later in the Chennai under the English and the Pondicherry under the French, the merchants also saw in these early colonial enclaves a place of the security from where they could carry on the business safely, free from the continuing political turmoil in the Tamil region. Now the Indian merchants were not at all at a disadvantage in their dealing with the European till about the 1700. In the Surat, the situation changed because of the threat posed by the Maratha incursion and the instability of the Mughal state to provide the security. In Chennai, the English had stabilized and they could put the pressure on the merchant to accept the unviable terms in order to increase their exports of the cloth to the Europe. Gradually, the power relation between the English and the local merchants began to change. The great merchant princes who were dominant players on the trading scenes in the previous century, they will disappear. The expansion of the demand from the Europe for the Indian textiles also had an impact on the indigenous economy. Initially, the increased demand was beneficial to the local economy. The productive resources, labor, raw material, capital could respond positively. However, as the demand for the Europe continued to grow, the pressure to increase the production exponentially began to strain the productive resources. The frequent famines in the south and the shortage of the food and the raw material, for instance, were the additional burden which the weaver had to bear. Now, thus, though the increased trade opportunities were beneficial in the short run, the long term effects were not nearly positive. मतलब कि शुरू शुरू में तो ये लगा कि हमें जो है अपना माल बेचने के लिए हमें जो है एक और नई जगह मिल गई है, बट ये जो एक अपॉर्चुनिटी थी ये शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए ठीक थी, क्योंकि धीरे धीरे जैसे आपकी प्रोडक्ट की मांग बढ़ेगी उतनी आपकी सप्लाई भी होनी चाहिए. So as the demand for your product will increase, you should be backed by the supply also, and that was not the scenario in the long run. लंबे टाइम में ऐसा कुछ होने वाला नहीं था, क्योंकि you need the resources. So that is the thing, because you are not providing the services, you are providing the products to the European community, और वो प्रोडक्ट्स जो है वो कंज्यूम हो जाएंगे, एंड फॉर दैट यू रिक्वायर द रॉ मटेरियल, एंड एट दैट टाइम दीज वर नॉट मैकेनाइज्ड, एंड फॉर दैट यू रिक्वायर टाइम ऑल्सो टू मेक दैट प्रोडक्ट. Over these 150 years, the English in the India were gradually undergoing a metamorphosis from being traders to the builders of the trading empire, eventually emerging as the virtual rulers of the large part of the country. Now, this was the first part that we covered, and a boring part. In the second part, we will start with that is the arrival of the European and the aftermath. So the first to arrive in the India would be Portuguese in India. During his first voyage, the Vasco da Gama. Now this would be interesting, and this would be very useful for your. Now, other than that, you have to do in the upper part. Do make notes from the your this part. That is the your small part. That is part of the economy. That the cotton merchant, and that make a note from there also. Now it is important part that we are going to start from here. Now, during his first voyage, Vasco da Gama came with the 170 men in the 3 vessels. Now, the cordiality of the Jamorin, the rural of the Calicut, made him comfortable. He journeyed back on the 29th August 1498 with only 55 surviving men, and of the 3 ships, 2 were the laden with the Indian goods. नाउ ये क्या कह रहे हैं कि वास्को डी गामा जो है भारत आता है. वास्को डी गामा 1498 में भारत आता है, और वो जब भारत आया तो अपने साथ 170 आदमी और 3 वेसल्स लेके आया. तो 3 वेसल, और जब वो यहाँ से वापस जाता है अगस्त 1498 में ही, तो उसके बाद सिर्फ 55 आदमी होते हैं, और उन 3 शिप में से 2 शिप होती हैं वो इंडियन गुड्स की भरी होती हैं. So the Vasco da Gama came here to trade with the India. Initially he came with the 170 men and the 3 vessel. Now he was cordially invited and he was welcomed by the Jamorin. So he journeyed back. When he went back, he was having the 55 men, and the out of the 3 ships, 2 ships were full of the goods, Indian goods. So much of the good he carried. Now, Gama's success made the Portugal to send the 1200 men. So this date would not be there. Their date would be not be accurate, but he came in the first time he came to the India in 1498 itself. That is not the issue. He came in the 49 itself. Now, Gama success made the Portugal send 1200 men with the 13 vessel. So अब की बार बोला ज्यादा लोग जाओ तुम, और अब की बार 1200 आदमी भेज दिए 13 वेसल्स के साथ. एंड अंडर दी पेड्रो एल्वरेज कैब्रल, कि बोला कि वास्को डी गामा तू अकेला मत जो, अपने साथ जो पेड्रो एल्वरेज कैब्रल को लेकर जा तू. On 29th October 1502, Gama visited the Calicut for the second time with a fleet of the 20 vessels. Now, Gama moved from the Calicut to the Cochin as its harbor was better. Now, he soon realized that the monopolistic trade of the Arabs needed to be broken if the European trade was to thrive. और इसको पता लग गया था, he realized that the Vasco da Gama realized in order to be Europe has to prosper, the trade monopoly of the Arabs have to be broken. Now he used the enmity between the two Hindu rulers of the Cochin and the Calicut for this purpose. Now before he returned to the Portugal, he established a factory, that is the warehouse in the Cochin, and the prison at the Kannur. Next is the consolidation of the Portuguese trade. The Portuguese stopped yearly expedition and instead decided to appoint a viceroy. तो इन्होंने सोचा कि अब हम यहीं पे रुक जाते हैं, एक अपने वाइसरॉय को छोड़ देते हैं, क्या रोज का आना रोज का जाना है, परेशान हो गए हैं. The first viceroy was the Francisco de Almeida, who followed the what is known as the Blue Water Policy. Now, accordingly, he added more ships to strengthen the navy rather than adding more settlements. He destroyed the fleet of the Jamurin and a fleet sent to the Sultan of the Egypt. He befriended the ruler of the Cochin and built the fortress at the Cochin, Kannur, and the other places on the Malabar coast. Albuquerque, the successor of the Almeida, was the real founder of the Portuguese Empire in the India. Now they have not written in the detail in the 11th class में भी ये ऊपर ऊपर से ही लिख के आगे निकल गए. They have not talked about the in the great detail. Now he defeated the Yusuf Adil Khan. So this person that the Francisco de Almeida made the Portuguese the powerful in the navy. He made the navy the most powerful in the Indian Ocean region. Now in a battle near the Chol, he defeated his son was died, and he defeated the complete fleet of the Muslims, Arabs, and the Indian rulers, the ruler of the Gujarat. Now the next one person, that is the Albuquerque, he was the real successor of the Almeida, and he was the real founder because he establishes the territorial power. He makes the territorial power, the Portuguese as the territorial power. He defeated the Yusuf Adil Khan of the ruler of the Bijapur in the 1510, and he captured the Goa. He developed the Goa into a center of the commerce by making all ship sails on this route. He encouraged the people of the all faith to settle in the Goa. He was in the favor of the Europeans marrying the Indian women and settling down in the Portuguese controlled territories. His conquest of the Malacca in the Malaysia held by the Muslims, who commanded the trade route between the India and the China and the Makkah and the Cairo, extended the empire. He attacked the Arabs and was successfully in taking the Aden. In 1515, he took the control of the Ormuz. Now, Albuquerque itself, he has attempted to stop the practice of the sati. Now, the two more viceroys played the significant role in the consolidating the Portuguese Empire in India. They were the Nino da Cunha and Antonio de Noronha da Cunha. The Cunha occupied the Basin and the Diu in 1534 and 1537 respectively. तो बसीन पर कब्जा कर लिया जाएगा 1534 में, और ड्यूब was acquired in 1537. The port of the Daman was wrested from the hands of the Imadul Mulk in the 1559. Meanwhile, in the middle of the 16th century, the Portuguese control over the Ceylon increased with the completion of the fort in the Colombo. Now, it was during the period of the Naroha the Mughal ruler Akbar visited the Cambay in the Gujarat, and the first contact between the Portuguese and the Mughal emperor was established. Now, in the 1580, the Philip II, the king of the Spain, defeated the Portugal and annexed it. In India, the Dutch defeated the Portuguese in the Ceylon and the later seized the Portuguese fort of the Malabar coast. Thereafter, rather than protecting their settlement in India, Portuguese became to evince the greater interest in the Brazil, because Brazil was near to the Portuguese. The impact of the Portuguese presence. For the first time in the political history of the India, the Europeans conquered and they seized the territories from the Indian rulers. The Indian rulers remained divided and the European took advantage of it. The European adopted the new methods of the warfare. Gunpowder and the superior artillery played a significant role. Now, Portuguese could contain the monopolistic trade of the Arabs, but it did not really help them. Instead, it benefited the British, who removed the pirates on the sea routes and made the sea voyage safe. The marriages between the European and the Indians, encouraged by the Portuguese in the territories occupied by them, created a new Eurasian racial group. Now, they were the ones who were later taken to the other Portuguese colonies in the Africa and the Asia. Now, the presence of the Portuguese in the very much evident in the Chennai's Santhom. Mylapore was the Portuguese Black Town. Black Town of the British period was the George Town. सो पोर्चुगीज का ब्लैक टाउन क्या था? माइलापोर था. एंड फॉर द ब्रिटिश इट वाज द जॉर्ज टाउन वाज द ब्लैक टाउन फॉर द ब्रिटिशर्स. Now, following the establishment of the Portuguese settlement, Jesuit missionaries visited the India. Notable among them were the Roberto de Nobili, whose linguistic ability enabled him to write extensively in the Tamil and the Sanskrit. He is considered as the father of the Tamil prose. Now, Henry Hughes introduced the printing in the Tamil and is called as the father of the printing press. Now, clashes occurred between the Portuguese and the Muslim group on the pearl fishery coast in the 1530 over the control of the fishing and the pearl dividing rights. And delegation of the Paravas complained to the Portuguese authorities at the Cochin about the atrocities inflicted on them by the Arab fleets and they sought their protection. Seizing the opportunities, the Portuguese they sent their Roman Catholic priest, that is the Padris को भेजा, who converted the thousands of the fishermen to the Catholic religion. Now, following this, Saint Francis Xavier, one of the founder of the Society of the Jesus, arrived in the Goa in the 1542. Now, this person is important and traveled as far as the Thoothukudi and the Punakkayal to baptize the converts. Now, Xavier established a network of the Jesus mission centers. His visit is evident from the shrines dedicated to the Saint Xavier and the towering churches that came up in the fishing villages of the Coromandel coast. The Portuguese threatened the disruptions of the trade by the violence unless their protection, that is the cartridge, was brought. Under the cartridge system, the Portuguese extracted money from the traders as price for their protection against what they termed as the piracy. But much of this was caused by the Portuguese freebooters themselves, and so the whole system was a blatant protection racket. Now, this was about the Portuguese we did. Next, we will do the Dutch. After 2 minutes of the break, we will do the Dutch. 2 मिनट के ब्रेक के बाद अब हम डच पढ़ेंगे. So let's start with the Dutch part. Now the first we have done the Portuguese. Now the thing is that you have to consolidate the things in your mind. Now until you do not read a thing or a book 2 to 3 times, you will forget these things after some time. So consolidation is required. Now next comes is the Dutch. The first Dutch expedition to the Southeast Asia was in the 1595 by a trader Jan Huygen van Linshoten, a merchant from the Netherlands who lived in the Lisbon. Now there were the several companies floated by the traders and individuals to trade with the India. Now the state intervened and they amalgamated them all and created the Dutch East India Company in the 1602. Known as the United East Indies Company in Dutch, Verenigde Oost Indies A Company, abbreviated as the VOC. The newly created company established its hold over the Spice Island of the Indonesia. In 1641, the Dutch captured the Malacca from the Portuguese, and 1658 the Dutch forced the Portuguese to part with the Ceylon. The Dutch were successful in the Spice Islands, but they suffered the reverses in the India at the hand of the British. Now the Dutch defeated the Portuguese and the British defeated the Dutch. If we talk about the Dutch in the Tamil Nadu, the Portuguese who established a control over the Pulicat since the 1502 were overthrown by the Dutch. In Pulicat, located 60 km north of the Chennai, the Dutch built the Castle Galderia. The remains of this 400 years old fort can be seen now. The fort was once the seat of the Dutch power. The Dutch established their control in the Masulipatanam in the 1605 and they established their settlement at the Pulicat in the 1610. The other Dutch colonial forts and the possessions include the Nagapattinam, the Punakkayal, Porto Novo, Kudalore and the Devanampattinam. So you can see this is a Dutch cemetery at the Pulicat, the remains of the Dutch. Now Pulicat served as the Coromandel headquarters of the Dutch. So on the Coromandel, the headquarters of the Dutch East India Company was the Pulicat. The diamonds were exported from the Pulicat to the western countries. The nutmeg, cloves and the Makkah too were sent from the Europe. A gunpowder factory was also set up by the Dutch to augment their military power. Now, one less fact about the Dutch is that they were involved in the slave trade. Now, people from the Bengal and from the settlements such as the Tengapattinam and the Karaikal were brought to the Pulicat. The Dutch employed the brokers at the Madras for catching and the shipping the slaves. Famines, droughts, and the war that resulted into food shortage led to the flourishing of the slave trade. Now, Will O'Disick, he was a PhD scholar at the Leiden University. In one of her recent research paper, noted that the passenger list of the slaves transported in the Virangde Osate company ships within and from the Bay of the Bengal from the June 1621 to the November 1655 showed a total of the 26,885 men, women, and the children, of which 1,379 died. She further wrote that the export of the Coromandel slaves surged during a famine. Now, it surged during the famine and caused by the Nayak rulers of the Thanjavur, Senji, and Madurai after the fall of the Vijayanagar Empire. Now, a subsequent invasion of the Bijapur army led to the destruction of the fertile agricultural land of the Thanjavur, pushing more people into the slavery. Now, this time, 1646, around 2,118 slaves, mostly drawn from the places situated along the coast of the Adirampattinam and the Tondi and the Kayalpattinam. Now the French. Now this was all about that. You have to know about the Dutch. Dutch में आपको इतना ही पढ़ना है. Dutch important नहीं है. Portuguese is important, जो कि आपको जानना है, क्योंकि Portuguese were the first to arrive in the India. The French attempted to establish a trade, and these French are also important. The French attempted to establish a trade link with the India as early as 1527. Taking a cue from the Portuguese and the Dutch, the French commenced their commercial operation through the French East India Company that was established in the 1664. Unlike other European powers which appeared in the India through the private trading companies, the French commercial enterprise was a project of the King Louis. At the beginning, the Portuguese were. Now, before the Portuguese, the power of the naval power was the Mughals. Mughals, before the advent of the Portuguese, Mughals were the powerful naval power. Then after that the alone and the sole power, naval power, will become the Britishers. The French commercial enterprise was a project of the King Louis XIV. So वहाँ के राजा का ये project था. His Minister of the Finance, Colbert, was instrumental in establishing the French East India Company. As the French effort was a government initiative, it did not attract the general public of the France, who viewed it as yet another way to tax the people. So लोगों से जब पैसा लिया, लोगों को लगा कि ये क्या फ्रॉड, एक नई स्कीम निकाल दी कंपनी ने, इन्होंने, राजा ने, अब ये दोबारा हमसे पैसा लेना चाहता है. So it depends upon the time, na? It depends upon the time. Now, until when the Portuguese were there in the India, they were the superior. When British came to India, they were the superior. So it depends upon who is ruling and who is at which time. So it is a subjective issue. The Pondicherry through the Madaskar. The French traders arrived in the Madagascar in the Africa in 1602. Though the French colonized the Madagascar, they have to abandon it in the 1674, accepting a small coastal trading post. Berber, a French agent in the India, obtained a firman, a royal command or the authorization on the September 4, 1666. So they have asked you the time also, na? They have shown you now the time period 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. They must have asked like this, na? If they have asked that the in a normal way that who was the superior naval power, so if they have generally asked, so we cannot tell, na, generally what it was or what it was not, because the book tells that the during the Almeida's policy was the blue water policy. He made the Portuguese the naval power, and when the Albuquerque will come, he will make the Portuguese the territorial power. Now, on this September 4, 1666, from the Aurangzeb, and the first French factory was established at the Surat in the December 1668. Much against the opposition of the Dutch. Within a year, the French established another factory at the Masulipatanam. Now, factories in the then context refer to the warehouse or a place where the factors or the commercial good. Factories in then context refer to the warehouse or a place where the factors or the commercial agents resided to transact the business for their employees abroad. Now, realizing the need for a strong foothold in the India, Colbert sent a fleet to the India led by the Hay, Jacob Blanquet de la Haye. The French were able to remove the Dutch from the Saint-Thome in the Mylapore in the 1672. The French sought the support of the Sher Khan Lodi, the local governor who represented the Sultan of the Bijapur, against the Dutch. The Dutch befriended the king of the Golconda, who was a traditional foe of the Bijapur. Now, it was the Sher Khan Lodi who offered the Pondicherry or the Puducherry as a suitable site for the French settlement. Now, Pondicherry in 1673 was a small fishing village. Francis Martin, who became the governor of the Pondicherry, later had spent 4 years in the Madagascar before arriving to the Surat. Now, he made the Pondicherry the strategic center for the French settlements in India. The countryside through which we passed, outskirts of the Pondicherry, was well cultivated and very beautiful. Rice was to be found in the abundance, where there was water while the cotton was grown. The Francis Martin about the landscape of the Pondicherry in his diary. Next comes the rivalry and the wars with the Dutch. The French attempts to capture the Pondicherry were not easy. They had to deal with their main rivals, the Dutch. From 1672, France and Holland were continuously at a war. In India, the French lacked the men, money, and the arms, as they had diverted them to the Chandranagore, another French settlement in the Bengal. Now, therefore, the Dutch could capture Pondicherry easily in the 1693. So, why Dutch was captured? Because the French did not have the enough manpower. Now, it remained with the Dutch for 6 years. In 1697, according to the Treaty of the Reykjavik, Pondicherry was again given and restored to the French. However, it was handed over to the French only in the 1699. Francis Martin remained as its governor till his death in the 1706. The French secured Mahe in the 1725 and the Karekal in the 1739. The French were also successful in establishing and extending their settlement in the Qasim Bazar, Chandranagar, and the Balazor in the Bengal region. Pierre Benoit Dumas was another able French governor in the Pondicherry. However, the French had to face a threat of the English who proved too strong for them. Eventually, they lost out on their hard earned fortunes to the English. The influence of the French can still be seen in the present day Pondicherry, Mahe, Karikal, and the Chandragore. The next will be the Danish. The Danish are also not important. So Dutch and the Danish are not important. The Denmark or the Norway together till the 1813 possessed the colonial settlement of India and Tamil Nadu. Trengambadi or the Trenkubar in the Tamil Nadu, Sirampur in the West Bengal, Nicobar Island were their possessions in the India. On March 17, 1616, the King of the Denmark, the Christian IV, issued a charter and created the Danish East India Company. This company did not get any positive response from the Danish traders. Admiral Ove Gezidi led the first expedition to the Ceylon in the 1618. The Danish could not get any trade contract in the Ceylon. While they were returning in the disappointment, their main vessel was sunk by the Portuguese at the Karikal. The 13 stranded sailors with their trade director Robert Crape were taken to the Nayak rulers of the Thanjavur. Robert Crape ably negotiated with the Thanjavur king and struck an agreement. According to the agreement signed on the 20th November 1620, the Danish received the village of the Trangambadi or the Trenkuvar or the right to construct a fort there. So you can see in the picture there a Trangambadi fort has been shown. So the Danish fort and at the Trangambadi was vulnerable to the high tidal waves, which frequently damaged the roads and the houses. Despite their involvement in the 30 Years' War and the financial loss they suffered, the Danish managed to set up a factory at the Masulipatnam. The small trading posts were established at the Pipli, Hooghly, and the Balazor. Investors in the Denmark wanted to dissolve the Danish East India Company, but the King Christian IV resisted it. Finally, after his death in the 1648, his son Frederick he abolished it. The second Danish East India Company was started in 1696. The trade between the Denmark and the Tranquebar resumed and many new trade outposts were established. The Nayak kings of the Tanjavur gifted 3 villages surrounding the Tranquebar. Two Danish missionaries, the first Protestant missionary arrived on the 9th June 1706. The Danish settled in the Andaman and Nicobar in 1755, but due to the threat of the malaria, they abandoned it in the 1848. Due to the Napoleonic War, the British caused the heavy damage to their possession. Sirampur was sold to the British in the 1839 and Trenkubar and other settlements in 1845. Next comes is the Danish of the Tamil Nadu. The Danish fort built in the Tranquebar is still intact. Bartholomew's Ziegenbalg along with the Heinrich Plitschau arrived in the Trenkubar in the September 1706 as the first Lutheran missionaries in India. They began preaching and baptized their first converts within the 10 months of their stay. Now their work was opposed both by the Hindus and by the local Danish authorities. And in 1707 or 08, Ziegenbalg had to spend 4 months in the prison on a charge that by converting the natives he was encouraging rebellion. The Copenhagen Missionary Society wanted to encourage an indigenous Christian church and accordingly instructed its missionaries simply to preach the gospel and not to bother about other matters. Ziegenbalg, however, contended that a concern for the physical warfare of the other was implicated in the gospel. Now, Ziegenbalg set up a printing press and published the studies of the Tamil language and of the Indian religion and the culture. His translation of the New Testament into the Tamil in the 1715 was the first in the any language, Indian language. The church buildings that he and his associates constructed in the 1718 is still in use today. He succeeded in establishing a seminary for the training of the local clergy. When he died on the 23rd February 1719, he left behind a full Tamil translation of the complete Bible and of the Genesis to the Ruth, that is the Bible story book series. Many brief writings in the Tamil, 2 church buildings, the seminary, and the 250 baptized Christians. Next, and the important part is the advent of the Europeans. The East India Company, or the English East India Company, commonly called as. So, a group of the wealthy merchants of the Leadenhall Street in the London secured a royal charter from the Queen Elizabeth I to have a share in the lucrative spice trade with the East. The company, headed by a governor, was managed by a court of the 24 directors. So, company में initially 24 directors थे. In 1611, the King James I obtained from the Mughal Emperor Jahangir through the William Hawkins the permission for the regular trade. The English obtained some trading privileges in the Surat. The Viceroy of the Gujarat, that was the Prince Khurram, or the Governor of the Gujarat, Prince Khurram, they granted the trading privileges. But the British could not operate freely because of the Portuguese exercised a powerful influence in this region. Initially, the Portuguese instructed the Jahangir not to permit them to trade in India. The Madras was ceded to the East India Company in 1639 by the Raja of the Chandragiri with permission to build a fortified factory which came to be known as the Fort St. George. This was the first land holding recorded by the company on the Indian soil. In 1645, the governor of the Golconda overran the territories under the company control in the Madras. Aurangzeb conquered the Golconda in 1687 and brought the company's territories under the Mughal rule. But the privileges granted to the English continued. Within a short time, Madras replaced the Masulipatam as the headquarters of the English on the Coromandel coast. The island of the Bombay, with which the Charles II has inherited as the dowry, it was later transferred it was given to the company in the 1668. The charter of the 1683 empowered the company to raise the military forces and right to declare war or to make the peace with the powers in the America, Africa and Asia. In 1688, Madras had a municipal government with a mayor. In 1693, the company obtained the another grant of the 3 villages surrounding the Madras. And in 1702, The 5 more villages were granted. So you can see the Chandragiri fort. Now next comes is the Bengal. In the Bengal, it was a long drawn struggle for the British to obtain the trading rights. The company obtained the trading rights from the Shah Shuja, the second son of the Shah Jahan, the governor of the Bengal. He is not the same Shah Jahan. Mughal ruler नहीं है ये governor of the Bengal and the governor of the Bengal. So this person is the Shah Jahan and his son Shah Shuja and the governor of the Bengal. But there were no royal confirmation of the such privileges. The trading right from the British in the Bengal were obtained only in the 1680. Local officials interfered with the trading rights of the British, and this resulted in the company declaring the war with the ruler representing the Mughals. The peace was restored in the 1690 and the company established their first settlement in the Sultanati site or the Sultanati in site in the Bengal. The factory was fortified in the 1696 and in the 1698 the company secured the Jamidari rights over the 3 villages Sultanati, Kalikata and the Gobindpur in return of the for a payment of the 1200 rupees a year. The fortified factory was called as the Fort St. George or the William. So this is the second fortified fort they made in the India, which became the headquarter of the presidency in the 1770. The Norris mission. Sir William Norris sent the English King William III in the 1698 to meet the Aurangzeb to get the full English jurisdiction over the English settlement. Now this was to confirm the existing privileges and to extend their trading rights further. But this request was conceded only during the 1714 to 1717 when a mission under the Surman was sent to the Mughal Emperor Farrukh Shir, who obtained a Farman granting of the trading rights addressed to the local rulers of the Gujarat, Hyderabad and the Bengal. Next in the series is the Carnatic Wars. The British had to fight 3 wars with the French to establish their supremacy, which in history are called as the Carnatic Wars. The Carnatic is a region in the South India lying between the Eastern Ghat and the Coromandel coast. The region constitutes the present-day Tamil Nadu, Eastern Karnataka, northeastern Kerala and southern Andhra Pradesh. The First Carnatic War, 1746 to 1748. The Austrian War of the Success and the 7 Years' War fought in the Europe had their repercussions in the India also. The Austrian ruler, that is the Charles VI, died in the 1740 and he was succeeded by his daughter Maria Theresa. The France did not support her succession and joined hands with the German-speaking territories of the Austria such as the Bavaria, Saxony and the Spain. Then Frederick II, known as the Frederick the Great of the Persia, taking advantage of the emerging political situation, invaded and annexed the Silesia, an Austrian province, with the support of the France. The war fought between the Britain and the France in the Europe also led to the clashes between these two countries over the colonial possession in the North America and the India also. When the war broke out, the new governor of the Pondicherry, the Dupleix, appealed to the Moors, the governor of the Madras, to remain neutral. But a British squadron under the Commodore Barnett captured some of the French vessels with the Indian goods and precipitated the situation. Duplessis, shocked by the incident, appealed to the Anwaruddin, the Nawab of the Carnatic, to help him to avoid war with the English. Calm prevailed for some time. Meanwhile, the Dupleix contacted the La Bourdonnais, the French governor of Isle of the France, who appeared in the Indian waters with the 8 warships. Now, Pétain, who led the English squadron with these 4 ships, intercepted the French squadron, and in the battle on 6 July 1946, Pétain suffered reverses and retreated to the Hooghly, calculated expending some more ships from the Britain. The next comes is the fall of the Madras. The French squadron succeeded in the capturing the undefended Madras on the 15th September 1946. The governor Morse was asked to surrender above, but the Madras governor turned to the Anwaruddin for help. Now, Dupleix was clever in convincing the Nawab that he was securing the Madras from the British to be handed over to him. On 21st September 1746, the English were forced to the part with the Madras. But when the Nawab of the Carnatic asked the French to hand over the Madras to him as promised, the French dodged. Thereupon the Nawab sent a force of the 10,000 men under the command of his son Mahfuz Khan. Next is the Battle of the Saint-Thome and the Adyar. Nawab forces blockaded the Fort St. George, but the French forces pushed the Nawab's forces to the Saint-Thome. The French received the reinforcement, and Mahfuz Khan attempted to halt the progress of the French on the banks of the river Adyar. The French forces were able to wade through the water and inflicted a severe attack on the Nawab's forces, resulting in the heavy losses. Dupleix then set his eyes on the Fort St. David at the Cuddalore, which was in the British possession. The English, with the help of the Nawab of the Arcot, was trying to regain the places lost, but the Dupleix again played the diplomatic game by promising that he would hoist the flag of the Nawab in the Fort St. George for a week, and after that he requested the Nawab to hand over the town to the French. The Nawab agreed to withdraw his proposed help to the British. 2 attempts of the British under the Rear Admiral Boscawen to take the Pondicherry, they failed. But this time in the 1748, French and the English had signed the Treaty of the Aix-la-Chapelle. Under this treaty, the British and the French ceased their hostilities in the India. It was agreed that the French would hand over the Madras to the British. In return, the Louisburg in the North America would be handed to the French or the France. The Second Carnatic Wars 1749 to 1754. In the Europe, the peace prevailed between the British and the French. But the two colonial powers could not live in the peace in the India. They played one native ruler against the other. Dupleix wanted to enhance the French influence by involving in the wars of the succession in both the Hyderabad and the Arcot. The Dupleix supported the claims of the Muzaffar Jung, the grandson of the Asaf Jahan, who died in the 1748 in the Hyderabad as the Nizam of the Hyderabad. In the Carnatic, he supported the claim of the Chanda Sahib. A triple alliance was formed amongst the French Nizam and the Nawab of the Carnatic. The English, after losing the Madras, a precious possession, had only Fort St. David under their control. In order to reduce the influence of the French, the English supported the rival candidate Nasir Jung for the throne of the Nizam of the Hyderabad, and the Muhammad Ali after the death of the Anwaruddin in the Battle of the Ambur in the 1749. So Arcot Nawab Muhammad Ali, he has been shown in the picture. The Battle of the Ambur, this is an important battle. The Battle of the Ambur, the Muzaffar Jung, the contender for the Nizami of the Hyderabad, the Chanda Sahib, a claimant of the Nawabi of the Carnatic, with the help of the disciplined French infantry, inflicted the huge casualties on the Nizam and the Anwaruddin forces. Anwaruddin was killed. Chanda Sahib entered the Arcot as the Nawab, and the Muhammad Ali son Anwaruddin escaped to the Tiruchirappalli. The Battle of the Ambur was followed by the entry of the victorious forces to the Deccan. Nazir Jung was killed by the French army, and Muzaffar Jung was made the Nizam of the Hyderabad in the December 1750. Now Dupleix's dream of the establishing a French empire appeared good for this some time. Now Dupleix received the huge money and the territories both from the Nizam and the Nawab of the Arcot. When Muzaffar Jung required the French protection, Dupleix sent Bazzi, the French general, with a large French force. The Muzaffar Jung did not live long, and same people who killed the Nazir Jung also killed him. Now Bazzi promptly placed the Salabat Jung, the brother of the Nazir Jung, on the throne. In order to reduce the influence of the British and also with the view of the capturing the Muhammad Ali, who fled to the Tiruchirappalli after the Anwaruddin was killed, Chanda Sahib decided to take the Tiruchirappalli with the help of the French and the Nizam. Now about the Robert Clive. Robert Clive was born in the September 29, 1725. He had no interest in the studies and was expelled from the three schools for his indiscipline and lack of the interest in the studies. However, Clive had developed the notoriety for the fighting. Disgusted by his behavior, his father secured him a writer post in the East India Company and sent him to the Madras. Clive was later promoted as the governor of the Fent Sort David and was involved in the Carnatic Wars and the siege of the Tiruchirappalli. He won the Battle of the Plassey in the Bengal, from where the British Empire, came to be evolved in the India. Clive returned to the India to take up the governorship and secured the Diwani rights from the defeated Mughal emperor in the 1765. Clive amassed huge wealth and left India a fabulously rich man, with a personal fortune to the then value of the 2,34,000 pounds. Now this apart, his Jagir in the Bengal fetched him an annual rental income of the 27,000 pound. When he returned to England, he faced a parliamentary inquiry over the allegations of the corruption. Though exonerated, Clive committed the suicide. So आखिर में इसको मरना ही पड़ा. The Clive in the Second Carnatic War. Dupleix was also determined to take over the Tiruchirappalli with the help of the Chanda Sahib. Chanda Sahib troops were joined by the 900 Frenchmen. Muhammad Ali had only 5,000 soldiers and not more than the 600 Englishmen to help him. So Robert Clive's idea changed the course of the history. So he suggested the idea of the storming the Arcot when the French and the Nawab were busy concentrating on the Tiruchirappalli. So we do not require the UPSC will not ask the so much detail You have to learn about the things now. So in the detail they have given the Carnatic Wars. Such we do not require the thing. How many things you can keep in your mind? Now all the things, all the words you cannot keep in your mind. He suggested the idea of the storming the Arcot when the French and the Nawab were the busy concentrating on the Trichupali. Clive moved from the Fort St. David on the 26th August 1752 with only 200 English and the 300 Indian soldiers. As expected, the English received the help from the many rulers from the small territories. The Raja of the Mysore and the ruler of the Tanjavur rallied to support the Muhammad Ali. The Chanda Sahib dispatched a force of the 3,000 under his son Raja Sahib to take the Arcot. The Clive seized the Arcot on the August 31st and then successfully withstood a 53-day siege by the Chanda Sahib's son. The Raja Sahib, who was helped by the French forces in the Battle of the Arni, the English and the Maratha ruler Murari Rao faced an unequal number of the French and the forces of the Nawab of the Arcot. In the several battles that followed, including one at the Kaveri Pakkam, the Chanda Sahib was captured and he was executed. Muhammad Ali became the undisputed ruler of the Carnatic. Now, in Europe, the Britain and the France were not involved in any war, and so neither of them approved the policy of their companies fighting in the India. The French government recalled the Governor Dupleix. The Treaty of the Pondicherry was signed in the 1755 with the English. Both the countries agreed not to interfere in the quarrels of the Indian princes. The treaty also defended their mutual territories possession in the India, a situation that was maintained for nearly 2 centuries until Indian independence. Now, the Third Carnatic War 1756 to the 1763. The Third Carnatic War was an echo of the 7-Year Wars, that is the 1756 to the 1763, which broke out in the Europe in the 1756. It was a global conflict and was fought between the two arch rivals, the Britain and the France. The war was fought in the North America, resulting in the American War of the Independence, and the West Africa, which later became the French West Africa. In India, it manifested itself in the Third Carnatic War. Before turning our attention to the Third Carnatic War, let us see what happened in the Bengal in the meanwhile. So ये कह रहे हैं कि पहले थर्ड कार्नेटिक वॉर पढ़ने से पहले हम जो है बंगाल के बारे में पढ़ लेते हैं, बैटल्स पढ़ लेते हैं बंगाल की. So Battle of the Plassey 1757. The East India Company abused the trade permits that was the dastak granted by the Mughal Emperor by not paying the taxes to the Nawab of the Bengal and by involving itself in the internal trade. This apart, the company had given the asylum to the son of the Nawab, that is the Sirajuddaullah's hostile aunt, as the company refused to oblige the Nawab, who demanded the return of his nephew. The Fort St. William was captured and the Europeans were imprisoned. Responding to this situation, the company at the Fort St. George dispatched a strong contingent under the Robert Clive and the Watson. The battle that ensued is called the Battle of the Plassey. Now, it was alleged that the 146 European prisoners were kept in a room measuring the 18 to the 15 feet, and it was said that all except the 23 prisoners died of the suffocation. The veracity of the incident, known as the Black Hole Tragedy of the Calcutta, in the British accounts have been debated among the historians. Now, the Battle of the Plassey 1757 changed the position of the British from being a commercial power to the territorial power. It confirmed the privileges obtained by the company and they replaced the Sirajuddola with the betrayer, that is the Mir Jafar. The company's sovereignty over the Calcutta was recognized and it was given the sufficient land to maintain the military force. The Mir Jafar also agreed for the company's resident in the court. Mir Jafar was replaced by the Mir Qasim and the latter tried to assert his independence. Now, which was not to the liking of the company's official. Next comes is the Battle of the Buxar. After fleeing the Bengal, Mir Qasim aligned with the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, the Nawab of the Awadh. Sujauddaulah, who was equally aggrieved by the internal interferences of the company in their internal affairs. They declared war against the British at the Battle of the Buxar was fought in the 1764. By the virtue of its superior armed, the company forces won the battle. The victory of the British led to the signing of the Treaty of the Allahabad by the Robert Clive with the Shah Alam II. By this treaty, the company got the Diwani right to collect the land revenue from the princely states of the Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. Besides, the company obtained the three districts of the Burdwan, Chittagong, and the Midanpur in the Bengal and the sovereignty over the Calcutta. Now, British virtually became the ruler of the Bengal. Now, what you have to do is to read this book only like a story book and learn the old book. Old book is small and concise and from the exam point of view. So, जो old book है उसको आपको याद करना है और इस बुक को जो है आपको पढ़ना है एज अ स्टोरी बुक कि आपको बैकग्राउंड पता चल जाए. Now, Europeans trading centers in the India. So they have shown you the European trading centers. Now, outbreak of the Third Carnatic War. With the outbreak of the Seven Wars, the Clive captured the Chandragore, the French settlement in the Bengal. With this, the French influence ended in the Bengal. But they retained their power in the south. The French government sent the Count de Lally as the supreme commander of the French forces in the India. As British was active in the Bengal, Lally promptly secured Fort St. David after a short siege. Lally promptly secured the Fort St. David and Lally's next move was the Thanjavur, but the French were after the money from the Raja, which he could not give. Without a penny, the siege of the Thanjavur was lifted because there was a theft by the British attack on the Pondicherry. Threat of the British attack on the Pondicherry. Now, Lally wanted Bazzi to come from the Hyderabad to help him to defend the Pondicherry in case of the attack. Now, in the Deccan, the political situation changed quickly and the French lost both the Rajmundry and the Masulipatnam. The Salbat Jung, the Nizam of the Hyderabad, without fighting a battle, signed an agreement with the India or with the British. The Nizam transferred the Masulipatnam and the northern Sirkars from the French to the English. The combined forces of the Bazzi and the Lally captured the Kanchipuram and they proceeded to take the Madras. As the British were busy in the Bengal, the Madras had only about 800 Englishmen, 2,500 Indian soldiers. The siege of the Madras began on the 12th December 1758. The French could not progress till the February 1759, but both sides suffered the casualties. The French, however, could not continue with the siege as the supplies were dwindling. Meanwhile, the General Pocock brought the fleet to the relief of the Madras. Lally was forced to lift the siege and the fall back on the Kanchipuram. So this is the so much information that you do not require. Who was the Lally, Pocock, so many names. So you don't require these names. The Battle of the Vendivosh and the fall of the Pondicherry. Lally retired to the Pondicherry, leaving a French contingent in the Arcot. The British moved toward the Vendivosh, but suddenly fell upon the Kanchipuram and captured it. A French detachment of the British forces arrived under the command of the Sir Eyre Coote. The last-ditch battle was fought between the Iroquois and the Lally at the Vendivosh in the January 1760. Buzzy was defeated and taken as the prisoner. Lally retreated to the Pondicherry, but it was not besieged immediately. Meanwhile, the British captured the Senji and proceeded to the Pondicherry and laid the siege to it. Now Lally has recognized the defences and they put up a heroic resistance to the British. The siege of the Pondicherry continued for the several months and finally on the 4th February 1761 the Pondicherry fell. In the same year, the British took the control of the Mahe, another French possession in the west coast. All the French possessions were now lost. Finally, the hostilities came to an end with the signing of the Treaty of the Paris at the end of the 7 Years' War. Pondicherry and the Chandragore were restored to the French. The French had the henceforth be content with the Pondicherry, Karakal, Yanam or the Yannon or the Yanam and all the Union territories of the Pondicherry. Mahe, Kannur in the district of the Kerala and the Chandranagore, that is the Chandranagar in the Bengal. The English emerged as the undisputed colonial power in the India, changing from a trading company into that of the territorial power. So this was all and a small summary is given in the last so you can do. Now one more thing we wanted to do is the questions. So answer the first question. What would be the answer? Answer करो क्या आंसर होगा पहले क्वेश्चन का. Now Dash became the political headquarter for the Portuguese in the India. So what would be the answer of the first question? Goa became the political headquarter for the Portuguese in India. Second question, that was the gateway to the West Asia and the Europe. So Surat was the gateway to the West Asia and the Europe. Next, the French got a piece of the land. The English got a piece of the land from the local chief on which they built in the 1639. So it would be the first was the Fent St. George. Question number 4. Dash region was famous for its painted calamari fabrics which had the resin drawn from the clothes and they dyed. Answer of the question number 4. Answer the question number 4. Question number 5. Dash is associated with the blue water policy. This is the Francisco de Almeida. Then father of the printing press. This is the Henriques. Yes, Malabar is the correct answer. Then Dash was the Portuguese black town. Now Dash was responsible for the Amboina massacre. Dash served as the Coromandel headquarter of the Dutch East India Company. So no. Dash served as the Coromandel headquarter of the Dutch East India Company. So where are the other people? और कौन है अभी लाइव ऑनलाइन, कौन है अभी? और बाकी भी तो आंसर करो. बंदिता, आर यू देयर? शालिनी, आर यू देयर? Now Dash served as the headquarter Masulipatanam. Francis Martin made the strategic center for the French settlement in the India. Pondicherry. Dash was inherited by the Charles II as the dowry. During the first Carnatic War, Dash was the governor of the Pondicherry. Duplex. Robert Clive consolidated the British rule in the winning the Carnatic Wars. Sorry, this is wrong. The Battle of the Buxar. The Battle of the Vendivosh was the fought between the Iroquois and the Lely. Dash concluded the Seven War, the Treaty of the Paris. I hope this is clear to you. Now find out the correct statement. इनमें से statement correct कौन सी है? The Europeans were quite aware of the wealth and the power of the Mughals. Yes, this is the correct, true. The Dutch followed the English, arrived at the Bombay. False. Now Thanjavur survived as the Mughal ruled state. Now Bombay as an important trade center attracted the merchant from the Surat and the other parts of the Odisha. Okay, true. Now leave this question, come to these. Now from the following statement find out the correct answer. The Battle of the Plassey changed the British from the commercial power to that of the territorial power. तो जो बैटल ऑफ प्लासी थी उसने ब्रिटिशर्स को कमर्शियल पावर से टेरिटोरियल पावर बना दिया. यस, दैट वाज करेक्ट. आफ्टर द बैटल ऑफ द वेंडीवोश, वेंडीवोश की बैटल हुई थी 1763 में. ठीक है. द इंग्लिश इमर्ज्ड एज द कमर्शियल पावर from that of the colonial power. So second is wrong, only first is correct. So after the battle of the Buxar होगा, बक्सर के बाद जो है वो कमर्शियल पावर बनेंगे. Now next, Albuquerque was the real founder of the Portuguese Empire in the India. Yes, Albuquerque. This is the correct. This is the correct. Both are the correct. Now Europeans had arrived in the India in the 16th century. Europeans भारत में 16वीं शताब्दी में आए थे. Yes, this is correct. No, this is wrong. Europeans had arrived in the India in the 15th century. Portuguese 15th century में आ गए थे. Their intention was to procure the pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and the other spices. Second is correct. Now, India has strong manufacturing base and was particularly famous. India has a strong manufacturing base and was particularly famous for the variety of the cotton fabrics. Yes, agriculture was the most important economic activity. Yes, both are the correct. बट ए और बी में कोई रिलेशन नहीं है. नहीं, ए और बी में रिलेशन है. सो आंसर होगा ए इज करेक्ट, आर इज ए इज करेक्ट, आर इज, सो सी इज द आंसर. कौन सा क्वेश्चन, विच क्वेश्चन यू आर आस्किंग? Tell me the question number which you are asking. They were the manufacturers. They were the manufacturers and variety of the cotton fabrics. They were manufacturing. They were attracted to the, or there were the manufacturers also, na? The manufacturers, they were the manufacturers. I will show you. Go to the page number 1. How you will be agriculture? Cotton is grown on the soil only, na? Cotton is grown in the soil only, and when cotton is grown, cotton fabric is grown, and when manufacturing means that you are making the product from that, the cotton. Jamureen was the ruler of the Calicut. So first answer is 4. So eliminate the other one. ये तो आंसर होंगे नहीं. Then मुजफ्फर जंग, नवाब ऑफ द आरकोट वाज द, ये इसका आंसर होगा. सेकंड का फर्स्ट होगा. सो दिस इज द आंसर. रेस्ट पढ़ने की जरूरत ही नहीं है. नाउ राइट ब्रीफ आंसर्स. ये आपको, यू हैव टू राइट दीज आंसर्स, यू हैव टू राइट दीज शॉर्ट आंसर्स ऑल्सो. So answers in the detail, you have to write these answers also. So this was a chapter that we have completed, and it took me 1 hour to complete a chapter. And this timeline, learn this timeline. जो ये timeline दी हुई है इसको याद कर लेना. So this was the all in this class we did. So that was all. Thank you all of you. We will be meeting again tomorrow. So for the class.